Happy Monday.
Happy Monday.
Can y'all hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
All right, let's
Yes.
jump in. So, numbers. Let me get the numbers pulled up here. Um, we um, we have in Fulton County. Um, we are sitting on active listings right now, 557, and our graphs are pretty constant in Fulton County. In DeKalb County, we are trending upwards in active inventory, still over that 300 active listings. So that's a pretty good amount of listings in DeKalb. And then Cobb County, 335 active listings, still over 300, which we got real low at one point, down under 200 active listings. But anytime we're over 300, we're doing pretty good. If we tend to break 400, life's going to look really, really good. So once again, if you go to the website, therealestatestats.com, you can look at your local numbers. But I want to point something out, Mark and Rick, is we don't always talk about expired listings. And the reason I want to point this out is this is going to be a number that we need to keep our eye on going forward. So
Sure.
if the market starts to shift a little bit, I think we're going to see it in this expired listing number. I'm not necessarily seeing it yet. 40 is because it was the end of the month, right?
Right.
The March 31st expireds. But 20 listings expiring in Fulton County is not the end of the world. But if the market starts to shift, I think we'll start to see this number climb. What do y'all think?
Yeah, I agree. I think just based on the last time the market did a major shift, sellers are usually late to the party, realizing that the market has changed. So they keep pricing their property like it was yesterday instead of like it's tomorrow. So you'll see those expires increase because people are not reducing their prices to keep up with the market.
Yeah. And you have to be careful too, watching like 557, 21 expired. I mean, that's only 1 week. So if you add it up, the last 4 weeks, you might be more like 60, 80, 100, which is about 10%, which is, historically 30% is kind of the normal expired rate, 35. And so we're nowhere near any, the danger zone or concern zone, but you do have to pay attention, and pricing still matters. If you overprice a home, you get fewer bites and you don't, get competing offers, and that leads you to the highest return.
Yeah. There's something about the consumer mindset that they're willing to overpay for a property if it's their idea, but not if it's the seller's idea.
That's a fascinating way to look at it, Mark.
Thank you.
Well, no one denies their own truth. So if it's someone else's truth,
Very much.
there you go. Man, we're getting all philosophical on our data.
There you go. Well, I clicked on this article on Inman almost because I didn't almost click on it because time for price reduction. I thought, are they out of touch with reality? And of course, Inman has opinion pieces, right? But the truth is, inside of this article are a lot of good advice around, hey, what do we need to be paying attention to? If the market starts to move on us, what are the things we should really be in tune with? And obviously, increase in the number of months of inventory. Well, we track inventory every week, right? We were saying there's 557 active listings going on in Fulton County right now. And we certainly have had a lot of conversations around days on market being historically low. But what I think this article is really talking about is not what are they today, what do we need to pay attention to if it starts to move on us? It's giving us indication of what's coming. Meaning, if I'm going to sit at a seller's listing table tonight, what are the stats I need to be watching that it's talking about where the real estate market's going in the next 3 months, right? What do y'all think?
Yeah, I agree, especially looking at what it's done over the past 90 days. So where is it trending, not where is it at any given point.
You guys nailed it.
Perfect.
But I mean, today we count days on market or they were saying how many months of inventory. I think we're still inside of days in many markets and not months. So, until it's, a month and a half or 2 months, I don't, again, no need to pull the alarm, but the fire alarm, but you want to pay attention, because the longer you're on the market, there's still a stigmatization that goes with date. And, when the consumer thinks a house sells in a day and it takes 10 days, they're wondering what's wrong with your house. That's just the psychology of buying and selling.
100%.
So be aware of the psychological effect of shifting even into 30 days at some point.
Agreed.
Yeah. Another thing that I thought would be a good talking point is this homestead exemption. And here's what made me prompt this is think about the value of people's real estate that's happened over the last couple of years and what's going to happen to their taxes. And if they have a homestead exemption filed on their taxes, it kind of protects that price appreciation from a tax hit on property. So I think it kind of be an interesting talking point, one, to go back and re-educate ourselves as real estate professionals, what really is a homestead exemption and how do we consult people around it. But Mark, Rick, I think it'd be a really good touch on a database right now, saying, hey, if you're not aware, property values have skyrocketed. And I just wanted to double check and make sure you filed a homestead exemption on your property to protect that tax base from just getting out of control over the last couple of years. Ding, ding. Hey, you might want to sell your house because the values have gone up, but I'm also coming from a place of value add, right? I just thought, wow, it was a good thought process that I wanted to bring to the table. Anything y'all to add to that?
It probably would have been a better conversation last week or the week before, or like before April 1st, when most of the counties in Georgia have that deadline to file. But absolutely, it's always a good conversation to have, and having a conversation with them around how much their property has increased and the fact that you probably sent them a homestead letter telling them to do this, and if they did it, they're saving money. So you've added value there, and if they didn't, wow, look, if they had listened to you, they would have saved money. So it's either way, you're the hero.
100%. You nailed it. And it's easy to get busy and forget, and you can't file until typically, I think, the first of the year, and then through April, I think 1st looks like it says. Mm-hmm. So if you bought midsummer and you weren't paying attention, asleep at the wheel, you can miss some real savings. So anytime you can save your clients money or help them earn more money or create more value, you win bonus points.
For sure.
100%. All right. So opinion piece. What's this about?
The hostile takeover.
I mean, he must be seeing something. He must see something that not everybody sees, and he also has capacity.
I have an opinion.
Capacity has few that and I think he also enjoys publicity, and this is a real public move and I think he can manipulate markets to some degree with his influence. But that's just one piece of it. So, what's your opinion, Brett? Let's bring it.
Yeah.
I think Elon Musk is buying the largest database available to buy. He's buying data and a database. And if you think about it, what are the largest databases out there? You got Facebook, which is already owned. Amazon probably has it. This is probably the largest database available for somebody to buy if he can pull it off. How many people have a Twitter account that has an email address attached to it, a cell phone number attached to it? How could he monetize that database if he was able to pull off this takeover? And I just thought, from a real estate standpoint, how important is the conversation around database? Really the value of a business, the value of Twitter, I think, is more in the database than it is in the actual company. Mm-hmm. My opinion, I could be totally out of left field on this one, but if you think about the largest databases in the world, Twitter certainly seems to be one, I think, that's available.
Yeah.
I'm crazy. I'm with that. I just thought of that when I saw this.
Well, Instagram, TikTok. I mean, there's only a handful of social platforms that are universally, known. So I think you're spot on. I think $43 billion, he's not trying to buy the opportunity to post more on Twitter. It's obvious that there's advertising money and also remarketing potential that goes with having control of that data.
Right. Well, and when
And
you're
it
driving a
just is
Tesla,
a good reminder to all of us.
yeah. Well, when you're driving a Tesla, it's mapping out the road underneath it as it drives. So the more Teslas on the road, the more it's mapping, and the more it's tracking people's behaviors and travel habits. So he's a data company already.
100%. All right.
Maybe he's
I'm going to
Big
make
Brother.
He could be, man. He could be. All right. So let's take a stab at explaining this for a second. So this is what's called the CPI, or the Consumer Price Index, which is AKA inflation. And you can see over here on the right side of this graph, we've really spiked in the last year and a half around inflation, which is putting our regular inflation, the blue line, which is getting close to 9%. You can see the red line is core inflation. So the blue line is all goods and services, and the red line is basically the core goods and services we use to live our lives, if you will. Not everything, but the core goods and services. So I want you to see something here. If you follow this 9% line all the way over to the left, the last time the country had any kind of inflation in the 9% range was in the early 80s. So Mark, Rick, what was interest rates in the early 80s?
Teens, right? It
Yeah,
ran into the
double
high
digits,
teens.
right?
High teens to
Yeah. So what my understanding of economics around inflation is this: the government is not interested in us having out of control inflations. So what they plan to do is continue to raise interest rates until they slow down inflation. So the question we've got to all ask ourselves, and this is not a good or bad, it's just an understanding conversation, is if the mortgage rates go from 3.75 to 5%, does that slow down consumer habits?
It
What do you
can.
think? Maybe a little.
A little. I mean, it's about the psychology of feeling like you're making a smart decision. And it also hinges on perception of affordability, and fear is the biggest driver. If we buy this house and the interest rate goes up a point, what's the net impact on our lifestyle? And based on that answer, that'll dictate the amount of excitement they have for paying above asking price or even buying. And the other point is people that are on the very front end of affordability, like our first time home buyers may be affected. They would be affected first. They have less money to put down to manage, what that overall loan balance is. And there's also, in some cases, 1 or 2 points might take them out of qualification.
Sure. So, but at the end of the day, do you think the average consumer is going to not buy a house because we have a 5% interest? Maybe not. 7%, probably a little more. 10%, they may slow it way down. And the comment is not predicting where interest rates are going to go. The comment is the federal government's going to continue to raise rates until they slow down inflation. And we saw that in the 80s, meaning that's why interest rates got so high, is because they were trying to slow down this 15% inflation. Mm-hmm. And then at some point in time, the economy stalls and then they start pulling the rates back down. So right now, because inflation's going up, we cannot economically understand that the government's going to continue to bump that rate until it slows down the inflation rate. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. That's a good thing in some hands, because you're right, affordability will get out of control just as fast on inflation as it will on interest rates. So there's a yin and a yang there. There's a balance that we're all trying to make sure we understand. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And, Gary Keller talked about this last week. He was saying, it's not you're constantly adjusting and counterbalancing. So the government rarely makes an adjustment where it lands exactly where they want it to be. It's going to over correct, and then they're going to under correct. Like it's a pendulum, and it swings back and forth. So I would expect it to go higher than it's going to be long term before it gets more stabilized.
100%.
Well, and then there's also the potential if a consumer thinks that the rates are going to spike short term, they may wait short term for them to come back and ice their motivation. But if it takes a while for the general population to accept 6 as an interest rate that's the new normal. So there could be some cyclical impact that's short term for sure, and then long term is dictated by the narrative and the trajectory again, and where even at 6, if you thought it's going to 8 in 6 months, you probably feel a sense of urgency if owning a home is important to you.
Well, and
so it goes back to consulting. I was just saying it goes back to consulting your client.
Here's the 10-year Treasury note, right? And we're seeing it's just creeping up, right? And that's what we're expecting to happen.
Yep. The good news is, even at 17% interest in the 80s, people still got new jobs, lost jobs, got married, got divorced, had kids, all the life events that make people want to buy or have to buy or sell a home, regardless of what they're paying.
Yep. It's just the 80-20 rule takes a firmer grasp. The lucky real estate agent who lands a few deals a year, just enough to stay in the industry, that's the low fruit that falls off the vine when things get tougher.
Agreed.
Which is again not good or bad. It just it's part of the cycle of life in our industry.
100%. So look at this. Half of the Atlanta homes sold above asking price in March. The stat they put down here is 52% of the homes in the designated market sold above asking price still in the month of March. I think this is an article that says our market is still hot. I think this is an article that says, hey, here's a reality, Mr. and Miss Buyer. Let me just explain to you that even though you may think it's slowing down or rates are going up or whatever, in Atlanta, Georgia, we're still over asking price half the time right now, which to me, I was surprised at the 48% that didn't go over asking price.
Yeah, it'd be interesting to see how many sold at asking.
Yeah. To the penny. I'm assuming there's a little some now, and did they throw in closing costs that were a benefit to the buyer? And there's still variables. And are we talking 2% over asking price or 5 and 10, which, it happens. I know that last week when, Rick Baldwin was on from Decatur, he and I hosted, and his data showed in Decatur proper, it was 72% of all the homes were going for asking or more. Which we would assume means multiple offers, right?
Right.
Of course. Well, otherwise, or perceived multiple offers.
Right.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
Y'all lose me?
Nope.
We got you.
All right. Last article here is annual change in home value. Here's how the housing market in March fared. So I thought what was interesting is this shows different parts of the country in March 2021 versus March 2022. And if I zoom out a little bit, maybe I can get the data on there. You can see in Atlanta, Georgia, in March 2021, the average sales price was $277,497, right? And then March 2022, the average price went to $360,679. Well, if you look at some of these other markets, it's kind of crazy. I'm just going to click back and forth. Watch the growth.
That's huge.
It's still a percentage game. It's a percentage game. But what I also think about is from that to that, the amount of wealth accumulation, the amount of equity in people's houses is just amazing right now. And I still think that's the conversation.
Well, and equity is
Rick,
irrelevant
I'm
until you
sorry,
sell.
Rick, 100%. So give me the talking points. What do you think we need to be prepared to talk about this week?
I mean, the short version of what I would say is I would share some of the data points with a client, talk about their personal circumstance and motivation, and overlay the likelihood that their motivation and inclinations are aligned with the market and the timing. So there's different variables like interest rates and inflation, and the consumer confidence I can only imagine at some point there will be an impact on consumer confidence. So if I were going to throw a dart at the optimal time to sell, I think spring of 22 is perfect. I don't think it gets better before it turns the corner.
Right. All the writing on the wall says interest rates are going up, so it's going to be less desirable for buyers, which means sell now.
That would be my.
Well, I think the peak and valley. I think we're at the top of the peak right now.
Right.
But I would illustrate it statistically and with a few articles like you've done, Brett, and showing, hey, if this is the trend line, what impact do you see? And the power of consulting is in asking the right questions.
There you go. The other talking point is it's really tough to look good on a Zoom call in a car with the laptop on your lap.
I can see, at least you're wearing your seatbelt, or is that a shadow?
I was just going to say, I feel like I should be wearing a seatbelt.
Buckle up. This is going to be a bumpy ride, people.
Yeah, but here's the thing is we talk reality on this call, and we're committed to bringing not fluff. We're not here to fluff this conversation. We're here to talk a realistic perspective. And I'd also want you to hear the market is amazing right now. And we start talking about what's coming, but don't take away from the fact that, I mean, the real estate agents are doing really well right now. We're selling a lot of houses. The houses are still selling for over asking price. I just want to make sure the messages don't get crossed.
Well, and on a personal note, you took us down a path with that comment that's brilliant. This is the time to put the pedal to the metal. This is the time to start storing away, reserves and, for the winter. In the winter, meaning a transition in the market or a potential slowdown. You just don't know. I mean, but I'll tell you this, if you pack reserves, it's like a second and third parachute. You'll never regret having it. It's just there. And if you don't need it, great. And so maybe slow down in some of your consumables and your non-appreciating asset acquisitions at this time, and just have some cash ready. That's the best advice I can give. And then if you need it, you don't need it, great. Go buy a new boat. But for now, I think this is the time to put the pedal to the metal, take advantage of the volume in the market, get your unfair share, and then be ready if the market should shift to be in the position that Warren Buffett would always tell you, sell high, buy low. Yeah. But you can't buy if you don't have, cash credit and you're not prepared for it.
Yeah, that was the other thing I was going to say. Is the lesson I learned through the last pandemic is get credit when you don't need it, right?
There you
Absolutely.
go. We got a few extra minutes. Anybody have any questions? We could clarify anything around?
So there was an article, and I don't have it in front of me now. It said that supply is expected to remain low for the next 3 years. I think was it an Atlanta Agent magazine?
I think you're right, Terry.
Did you see it, Mark?
Mm-hmm.
And I thought, when we show these figures to folks, there are those sky is falling people who think, oh, but the crash is coming and I'll just wait because then I'll be able to buy really low. And I thought that article is a good support. What else? And of course, this is a different time than 2008. Everyone has lots of equity. Mm-hmm. So you're not having distressed properties. What else?
Yeah.
Well, and a slowing of the market doesn't necessarily mean a dip in prices, right? Like a slowing in the market could just be fewer multiple offer situations, and people are paying more, but it's not necessarily a dip in values. Maybe they're just not appreciating as quickly. So I think people, if they're planning on a decrease in value, I don't know anyone that's been able to predict that.
Well, and it's probably geographically most influenced by geography. So if you're in an area with immigration and job creation and corporate transfers, the odds of that supply demand curve shifting rapidly are next to nil. We're still not building enough houses to support the immigration into Metro Atlanta.
There you go.
So it's going to, no matter the dynamics and the psychology of consumer confidence and affordability, there's still going to be some tailwind to support, home values staying in some realm of stability. At least for now, it looks like it for sure.
And then we have that chart. And I think Chuck's sending me one further back than the 2008 that shows it's very rare that prices dip. I don't know how far back we can go.
Well, the last time prices dipped was in 2008, 9, and 10. And the reason for the dip was simply a supply and demand scenario. Was people had to sell their house, whether economically distressed or were forced to move. And the fact that there was not a high enough demand to pay for it, they were forced to continue to drop prices to actually get the transaction to happen, right?
Right.
So hence the distressed sale. We just don't have consumers that are going to be in a position of distressed sales in any time in the future. With the amount of equity created, I don't see any path of lower prices in the near future.
Absolutely.
Right. Even
What about-
15, 20, or 25% will be an extreme deflationary home valued scenario. And most people, if they've had their house 2 or 3 years, they've got that just in the last 3 years and accumulated appreciation. So to give some back doesn't automatically trigger, a dark cloud in the form of foreclosures, REOs, and short sales.
Perfect.
Absolutely.
And I'll have to go back and look at the
All right,
slides
guys, there's
that-
your update.
Mika.
Didn't Gary speak to the rate of appreciation over the last few years, and that we're right where we need to be with appreciation and prices? So outside of the multiple offers and the 50 to 100,000 above list price, our prices are where they should be economically, as with the trend. Am I correct?
Yep. Yeah, we're back to that 4% appreciation trend line. You're right, Mika. Yep. And that's catching up from the pandemic, or from the downturn in 2008, finally back to that 4% line. You're right.
Interesting. Yeah, great point and good ad. Thank you. All right, so Brett's off. It's just us. I think it's time to sign off. You guys have an awesome day. Hope you enjoyed Industry Update.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, guys.
Thanks,
Thank
Mark.
you.
Appreciate you, brother.
See y'all.